Welcome, everybody, to CityLit Mental Wealth Festival and to our final event of the week, the Noisy Brain. So thank you all for joining us on this drizzly Friday afternoon, and I hope kind of over the next hour you'll enjoy our exploration of connections between writing, music and mental health, and particularly through connection and community. And that's something that's kind of struck me over the week. Some of you here this morning for our talk on everyday creativity, and just to see the sort of the connections and the links between people is just beautiful to see. So I hope kind of more connections come from today. So for those who are not familiar with the Noisy Brain is an app and social community that invites community members when they experience the noisy brain, when they experience kind of those overwhelming thoughts in the mind. It's a space where those words and those feelings can be shared. And not over in the sharing there, but what the Noisy Brain do, and we'll hear from Stu, who's the founder of the app, it does is connect those words to musicians. And through that creative process, what starts as a noisy mind becomes a piece of music, a song, and kind of that beautiful process, really. So we'll be hearing from Stu, who'll be talking about the app. We also have the honour of having NickK with us. NickK is a community member, and as a writer, his words have been taken by our musician this afternoon, Billy Crabb, who has turned NickK's words into a song. And we're quite honoured this afternoon because no one, I think, apart from Billy, has heard the song yet. So it's what we might call a reveal this afternoon. So we'll enjoy that as it comes. Before we start, we're just going to begin with a very short film about the noisy brain and really where the noisy brain is at the moment, and then we'll hear from our panellists about the story behind it and the power of kind of words, music and community in supporting well-being and mental health.
Wow, it's amazing. I never thought it would be interpreted like that. I don't know what I expected, but it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Tell you what, because I'm on medication at the moment, and it takes a lot to make me feel emotion. And I do feel I've got all what's the word? All goose pimply.
to invite our panel this afternoon up to join me on stage, and we'll have a little talk about the noisy brain, the community, and the power of music.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So welcome. Just to introduce the panel again, so we have Stu Mills, who's the founder of The Noisy Brain, NickK, who you saw featured in the video, a writer and contributor to the Noisy Brain community, and Billy Crabb, our musician, this afternoon. So to, in a sense, introduce The Noisy Brain, because part of what we do, part of the Mental Wealth Festival is exploring lived experience as well, and inviting and creating platforms for people to share their story. And one thing that I find really beautiful about The Noisy Brain is that it's an idea and a project that emerged from a difficult time in your life, Stu. Would you mind sort of telling us the story of your story and the story of the app?
I'll try. I'll precede that just by letting you know that I have a noisy brain. I struggle to sometimes tell a story from A to B because of I go A to B versus DHD, which is I got ADHD, and my mind wanders all the time. So this man here, this fantastic man who invited me, is here also to keep me on track, hopefully. So blame him when it goes wrong. So yeah, this is my first time sort of explaining the idea to an audience. I've done it a lot of times with individuals. I've had these conversations with all these people here, and I've told the story before I actually get them involved. And so you'll have to excuse me when I start bumbling my way through this. So what you've just watched, the film, is kind of where the journey starts, to be honest, because what happened to me almost didn't allow me to start this, because I nearly took my own life. So sorry, I knew I was going to get emotional. So it's what?
Feelings are welcome.
So I've had sort of depression on and off throughout my life. And about 3-4 years ago, I could feel myself spiralling. And I stupidly didn't tell anybody. I kept it all to myself and started drinking quite a lot, and caused my friends and family quite a lot of pain, including myself. I'd had depression on and off, as I said. I'd been on, about 25 years ago when I was working, I had a big breakdown at work, and somebody, a beautiful person, found me and recognised what was going on, and got the company. I used to work in advertising. Got the company, which was a big advertising company called Saatchi's, and this is 25 years ago. They were good enough to actually put me into counselling and sort of therapy for about 6 months, paid by them, which was great. I mean, that's 25 years ago, so that was probably quite unique, and I was lucky for that. But it kind of didn't really solve any problems. It sort of, I can kind of would have ups and downs and never really know why it was. But about 4 years ago, as I said, it started spiraling worse, and I didn't tell anybody, and that's where I went wrong. I started having intrusive suicidal thoughts. It would just basically become, sorry if it triggers anybody or anything, and I'll stop if it does. But what would happen, for no reason at all, there was no real major incident that started me having these thoughts. That was the kind of the scary bit. I would be out with my wife or go to the cinema completely fine, and then I would see, a tall building in the film, which had nothing to do with suicide or anything, but my mind would go, where is the nearest tall building, you know?
Been there.
Yeah. And it was kind of scary. Again, I didn't tell anybody about it, and I didn't even tell my wife, you know. She was sitting next to me in the cinema, and then one weekend it got worse, and we'd had a beautiful weekend together, myself and my wife, and she'd gone to work on the Monday, and I had the day off, and we'd had a weekend at a staycation at a tall hotel, and I just found myself, for no reason at all, on the balcony, just looking at where I'd land, and it really, really scared me. So I did my usual thing and just went drinking, and then I'd get into arguments with people, like arguments with friends, family, strangers, and one particular argument got me into a lot of trouble. I was drunk and I was confused, and I was obviously masking what actually was going on in my head. And I got into this argument and I lashed out. It was caught on social media. Sorry, somebody posted it on social media. Then the death threats started. Everything basically escalated, and I ended up having to admit that I had a problem to my family and friends, which was kind of where my life started again, kind of reset. And I was able to realise that the security blanket that was around me from all the time suddenly sort of like was there to protect me, you know. It was always there, but I'd never actually reached out and told anybody my story or how I felt. At the same time, once I started telling people, I couldn't stop writing, and I was writing rubbish. I genuinely read some of it back, and
I'm sorry, I've read some of your stuff and I can contest that. It's not rubbish. But carry on.
Well, some of it was rubbish to me because I couldn't remember what it was about. You know, it was all just written spur of the moment. And at the time, I went to AA as well, and I had a fantastic. I mean, advise anybody to go to AA if you need to. They were great. They're completely non-judgmental, and I had a mentor who was helping me, and just one day he was late, and I just took my pad out and started writing, and he turned up and he was like, "What are you writing about?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, leave the pad with me, go and get me a coffee." And I was sort of halfway to the coffee, and I was like, I haven't shown anybody this writing. Do I go and grab it, take it back from him, or do I let him read all this stuff, you know? So weirdly, I just left him to read it. And when I got back, he was really animated, and "Can I take a photo of these pages?" And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, I want to make them into songs." And I didn't even know the guy was a musician. And so we did our session, and a few weeks later I went to prison for a little while. It wasn't long, but it was prison, and it was in Singapore, so it was pretty nasty. And when I got out, a couple of months later, he texted me and said, "I've finished your song," and I'd completely forgotten. And he sent me this song, you know, which was just so emotional to hear my words in music. In my previous job, I've written commercials, and I've written lots, and I've made films, but it was a completely different experience. Immediately after hearing it, I just wanted to share that experience with other people, which I know I can't be the only one writing. But so that's what I did. I spent the last about a year and a half, I suppose, actually a little bit longer. I've known Billy for 2 years.
We've been in contact about a year and a half.
Yeah. And from that moment on, I just started trying to work out a way to share that experience of hearing your words back in song, because I've always, I mean, I'm not musical, but I know the power of music, and so then I started the Noisy Brain. It's all early doors. The figures are quite small at the moment. There's about 20 songs finished, and there's around about 40 or 50 songs being made around the world by musicians of varying standards, and increasingly more established musicians are adopting writings. I've got writers like NickK who contribute writings. I call them writings because I don't think they can be lyrics until they're into a song. Okay. So there's probably a better way of expressing it. But I always call them writings for some reason. Yeah, I mean mine are just babbles and anxiety-fueled rants. A lot of them. So yeah, this is like where we are, and we're encouraging people to become part of the community, and then we encourage people to write about their mental and emotional health experiences. And it's gaining, I hate this phrase because I keep hearing myself say it, but it's gaining momentum all the time. The community is growing, and there's a lot of music being made. So I've got sort of a lot of big aspirations for where we want to go. I was talking to a lady this morning, and I was saying that although we're focused on music at the moment because that's where the idea was born, I wanted to sort of expand that, because people's writings can obviously be created into pieces of art or film or any, theatre or photography projects, and that's where I would like it all to go. And there's a lot of big plans. There's things I want to be doing with creating events and gigs and helping promote the artists that were involved, the musicians, and so today is sort of like basically sharing that and hopefully recruiting a few more people to the community, and so that's where I am, and that's where I met these two fantastic guys. NickK, actually, we met through a mutual friend of through my wife, and NickK was like a prolific writer, like from the get-go, and he'll tell you his story about why that happened. And then again, Billy has been sort of on board like pretty much from the start as well, and just by chance later he'll be playing a song that NickK has written, and it'll be the first time that we've all heard it. So
you better like
awkward moment.
Yeah. Job done.
Well, thank you, Stu, and thank you for sharing your story. I think for me that was really important, because in a sense from a very difficult, challenging, almost life-ending experience, you within that, those words came in, and people and someone was there to notice them and transform them, and that's sort of the word that kept coming up for me. It's about kind of the transformative process, not only in terms of transforming someone's babblings, this internal world, and that's what the Noisy Brain is, right? When I think sort of when we have difficulties with mental health, it's because we can't quite find the language to encompass what those feelings are, or those thoughts are noisy. And it's kind of by sort of, attempting. I love the word attempt. I use it when I talk about art a lot. Art is an attempt. It's just getting it out there. There's something transformative.
For example, I do, I don't know if other people do this, you keep a pad by your bedside for those times when you're really anxious and you wake up at 4 a.m. and you suddenly got something in your head you've got to get down. Could be a poem, could be babblings, as Stuart says, and you just brain dump to get your anxious brain to be quiet, and then you look at it in the morning and you see if it's any good or if it's a load of crap, and yeah, it's quite helpful.
And as we were discussing on this morning's panel about sort of everyday creativity and the idea of sort of judgment around it, so I'm just picking up on that idea is that I think even in your examples, as what you thought was just your notes in a notepad, someone else came in and saw potential in that and could transform that. I think there's something nice about the sort of, you use the metaphor of the security blanket, and that it was there, but that sort of that courage it takes to share, almost like a pulling in of that security blanket that might be there, and that might be, you know, formal support outside and medical care, or it might just be family, friends, or a stranger who might reach out. I think if it's okay, I might come to Nick. Sorry, Stu, were you going to?
I wasn't, and I've forgotten what I was going to say. But no, I was going to say that it's kind of a weird sort of process, because as you say, like writing those, I mean, I didn't have any purpose for my writings. I don't know if Nick did, but I was just getting it all out, and that's what the Noisy Brain is supposed to be. It's an outlet to sort of like encourage people to write and express themselves, like, and through those bad times. I mean, it's not going to be a fix, like, but it's an outlet. And I think what I was realizing when I was doing it is I was getting so much out of myself, and I was feeling really good once it was out. But what I was really finding, until that chance meeting with the musician, what I was finding was I was writing it down and then reading it back, and I wasn't sharing it with anybody. And the moment I shared it with somebody, it was actually a relief. It was very similar to, as we all know, I mean, even like now, it's like a therapy session, because I'm talking, and like, you know, all of the conversations I've had with so many people around the world about telling my story, every one of them is a therapy session, because it comes to terms with what you're talking about, and then you also hear what other people have experienced. The weird thing about not knowing where those writings were going was it was very therapeutic to get it out, but at the same time I made the commitment, and I was lucky enough, and I thank my wife completely. She's been so supportive about the Noisy Brain and me pursuing this. Is that, you know, at the time I just decided to get out of my previous career, and I know that that's not an option for a lot of people, and that's not what I'm advising people, but I did need to, like, I call it going back to basics, and I did start walking, talking. My wife bought me pottery lessons, which was kind of weird the other day when I walked in and there was all the pottery there. I was like, that's weird. Like, and a nice coincidence, I enjoyed looking at the pottery earlier. But just actually, and even gardening. I started gardening, and I've never gardened. I used to always joke with my mum that she was always gardening, and suddenly I found myself gardening, and now I've got my wife's friends asking me for plants and things because I keep growing all these things. And I know it's not an option for everybody, but it is a case of just like making some time. You know, I love going for walks, and it's the biggest thing that I miss about not living in the UK is the countryside. I walk in Singapore and it's a rainforest, and it's bloody hot, and it's like there's also no views, like, but it is beautiful once you're in the rainforest and you can't see the city. But just making those opportunities, you know, it's not as drastic as myself just ducking out my career and going, I think I'm done. Like, but taking some time out for yourself, whether it is walks or whether it is taking up a pottery course or an arts course, or, you know, all those things just helps me.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I think it's something I'm taking away sort of from today. It's about, you know, we're talking about creativity and just this idea of creating time as a creative act, a time for something, a time for a walk, I think is really powerful to focus on. If I move down the panel to Nick. Nick, could you, you're a writer, sometimes poet?
I'm a copywriter by trade, so I write for marketing purposes.
which can be creative, depends on the company you're working for and how boring their product is. Luckily I'm in a new job and I'm really enjoying it, and there's room for creativity. But I've always, so basically what propped me up through my education was English. If I was crap at everything else, I was always good at English. And hence I did English at A-level, did English at university because I didn't know what else to do. You're good at English, go and study English at university. And I'd always written poems. And, you know, they're about different things. I'd sometimes take influences, like I read a lot of Seamus Heaney and suddenly got into nature poems, as an example. But that's not necessarily what you're going to ask me, is it?
No, you've got me in Seamus Heaney now.
I'm a little bit nervous. You have to be, nothing like putting an anxious person in front of an audience to make me feel a little bit more anxious.
Two anxious people,
Go on, sorry.
and then getting a camera to film it as well.
I guess
I was thinking you've got me in Seamus Heaney there. I did a talk a few years back at the festival about Seamus Heaney, and it's his line about, you know, I rhyme to see myself to set the darkness echoing, which I think is such a beautiful, kind of one of my favourite poetic lines. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked now, but I was just going to ask you, Nick, you know, obviously a member of the Noisy Brain community, so I just wanted to ask about sort of what brought you to the app, first of all, and then perhaps what that has brought for you.
I guess I should backtrack slightly. This might not be what you want me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. My mental health journey began about 20 years ago, so when I was 20. Came back from university and just found myself crying at random moments for no reason. Nothing was wrong. Had good family, good support network, but I was just randomly bursting into tears. And sat down with my mum and burst into tears because I was back at home. And she said, I think you're clinically depressed. Because my granddad had gone through that, so she'd grown up with it. And I went to the doctor and turns out it was. Now, what had happened was at university I had a very good time. A very, very good time, and unfortunately there's a big music scene in Manchester, and with that, if you're into that thing, comes recreational drugs, and I got very heavily into recreational drugs, certainly for my last year of uni, and that's what kicked off when I got home, the depression. My serotonin and all my probably brain chemicals were depleted. Anyway, that was my first episode of depression. Stupidly, I didn't learn, and probably from my 20s across up to 30, I still took a lot of recreational drugs because I thought, I'm on antidepressants, they do the job. It doesn't work like that, so lesson learned for anyone here. And I probably had in my lifetime about 6 or 7 what I call breakdowns, when you reached a point when you can't go any further, when you're thinking about suicide, when you're actively planning suicide, when you're writing suicide letters as well to give to your parents to find after you've gone, which is a really weird process to go through. Anyway, all of this culminated in me ending up getting sectioned about 4 years ago, I think it is now. Mental health wards are not nice places. I don't recommend them, not that you would. You've got a mixture of people in there. Some are in active psychosis, some are paranoid schizophrenics, some are in bipolar, so they're hyper. They're very noisy, very messy environments, and they pump you full of drugs to effectively shut you up, which is what they did with me. I was on 8 different medications. Exactly. And if you've ever watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or read the book, it's actually very true to life. Anyway, getting to the point, I found myself, when you're on a ward, 2 things. 1, you're doped up, so your brain is altered in the way you think. 2, you've got a lot of free time. There's only so many mental health colouring books you can go through. There's only so many wolf's heads you can colour in. And I found myself writing again, got my family to bring me in a pad and a pen. I said, I'm going to sit, I'm going to write. I don't know what's going to come out, but I'm going to write. And I was prolific. What came out, instead of being about nature and stuff like that, was about my actual situation. So it was all about mental health, but they were all metaphors for stuff. And I would write about 5-6 poems a day. And when I got home and I was a bit better, but not much, I typed these all up. And I was still in what would be called a dark place, so I carried on. And I squirreled these away in a folder on my desktop, and they were just for me. I didn't think anything of them, that was that. Fast forward about 3 years, and this mutual friend that Stu mentioned, Dave, who was in advertising, and that's how he knew Stu, said, look, there's this website that I think you'd be really interested in. One, it's about mental health, and I know your experiences. And two, it's about writing and poetry, and I know you love that. And I think, I might have got this wrong, but he gave me your email address. I think that's how we first hooked up.
I think so, yeah.
And I started emailing Stu, and we got on over email. And then I checked out The Noisy Brain. And then sort of on a whim, I just started uploading these poems. Because I thought, what's the worst that can happen? They get ignored. Sort of, when you're writing, you've got to have, or any creative process, you've got to have the humility to believe it's not that great. But someone else might find it interesting. And that's what I started doing. And then Stu would contact me and say, you know, Jess or Billy or someone has started working on a song from your writing. I'd be like, that's really cool. You're kind of like honoured that someone has seen something in something you just wrote for yourself and wants to turn it into something, and it's really cool. And that's it. That's how my involvement with The Noisy Brain started. And Stu and I have Zoomed a few times as well. He's a nice bloke. We got on, and yeah, that's it up to present day.
Yeah, thank you again for sharing your story with us. And there's a couple of things in there that I thought really interesting. That I think you mentioned metaphor as well, and sort of with the noisy brain with feelings. It's like sometimes language isn't adequate enough. I think metaphor is a kind of extremely powerful thing. Apologies for those who are there Monday, but I kind of use an analogy a lot about sort of when we're trying to confront something very difficult or something we don't really know. It's a bit like in Greek mythology, it's Perseus confronting Medusa. Right, everyone knows the story. Kind of you look directly at Medusa. Medusa turns you to stone. So what does Perseus do? He gets his shield and he's able to look at Medusa through the reflection. So I often see kind of art is the shield, or metaphor is the shield that enables us to perhaps see more clearly without kind of potentially kind of risk or something like this. It's a safer way of doing it.
I think
so I love that kind of metaphor.
Stu will find this, having been in advertising. I don't know what your route into Saatchi's and the other agencies was, but I went through an advertising course that taught you lateral thinking. So the thinking behind an advertising campaign, how you get from car insurance to meerkats, how you get from MasterCard to priceless as an idea. And so for me, I could never write anything literally because I'd had it hammered into my brain that that's boring. So you end up writing in metaphors or trying to write something that's a bit lateral, in the hope that someone else sees in it what you're trying to get across, without being too obscure.
Yeah, so there's a play, I suppose. There's a transformation. There's playfulness through that lateral thinking. Thank you. And then to Billy. So Billy, you're a collaborative musician with The Noisy Brain. Could you tell us a little bit about what got you involved? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, as Stu said, we kind of connected maybe 2 years ago, and it was right at the time. So I'm Greek, half Greek. And we have to do our civil service. And usually you would do it at the age of 18, but I decided I'm going to take 10 years off, go study, do whatever I wanted to do with music, and then hopefully be able to get out of it because I would have this amazing career. Things don't happen the way you imagine them to happen. So at the age of 27, 28, I decided I'll just go do it, be done with it. So 8 months later, I'm out of the military. By the way, I've lost all my connections here in the UK. No job, no nothing. COVID hits, so I'm like kind of stuck in Greece thinking about what am I going to do with my career. And it happened to be that Stu kind of found me at the right time. I was kind of going through this self-development, kind of trying to figure out what I'm going to do, what I want to do. And obviously struggling with not as severe mental health issues, but kind of just trying to decide what I'm going to do in life, and which can be quite stressful as it is. But so when I discovered The Noisy Brain, Stu was kind enough, or was it? It wasn't you straight away. It was Vivian.
Fran.
Fran, sorry.
Yes.
So Fran messaged me, introduced me to The Noisy Brain, and sent me a packet of writings. And I thought that was very interesting because, you know, it's I don't have to think about the lyrics basically. So I have an idea and I can just convert it into something. And so that seemed intriguing. I had a Zoom call with Fran. She talked me through everything about the Noise Brain. I really liked the idea. And I read through all the writings and happened to fall upon The Small Boat, which is the song that the poem I chose. And for some reason, it really reminded me of some Greek poetry. There's one specific I was telling you earlier. There's a poet, Cavafi.
So sorry.
He's got a poem called Ithaca, and if you read the lyrics, or
Nick, don't worry.
Nick's poem and Cavafi's poem.
50-50 chance of getting
50-50. Blanking on names now.
Let's hear it.
But yeah, so he just kind of really liked the way he wrote, and a lot of it has to do, as you'll hear, with elements. So sea, air, and that's kind of the way I like to write. I like to use things from my hometown, which don't necessarily refer to a specific person. It may be like nature, maybe a feeling, a smell, or something like that. So I kind of linked your poem to that as well. And yeah, ever since, it's taken me 2 years to finish this song, which wow, that's for a whole different story. But we're at a point where I was telling the guys earlier, it's in the final mixing stages, so hopefully it'll be out soon. Fingers crossed. Fantastic. 2 years later might be the release, but.
So we'll hear the song in a second, if that's okay, if you're ready. Just before we do play the song, Nick, is there anything you want to say to sort of introduce the song, or tell us a little bit about Small Boat? And
it's weird because a lot of the poems that I said that I wrote were written in a batch at a particular time in my life, and actually I not looked at them for a while because, good news, I'm in a happier place at the moment, and I sort of didn't want to look back at them, but I took the time last night to look back at Small Boat because obviously I'm coming here today and I wanted to refresh my memory. And well, the only things I would say about it was about two things. It was about loneliness and the isolation of depression, but sort of paradoxically wanting to be alone. Sometimes you don't want to be therapized. You don't want your family to try and be your therapist and tell you how you should live your life. You don't want psychiatrists to load you up with drugs. You just want to be left alone. So it was about being lonely, but also wanting to be left alone at the same time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's all I can really say about it.
I think so. So to think something else that I mean, we're talking sort of about writings, and Nick is like a trained writer, you know. But what the Noisy Brain also encourages is people that may not have written before, like to try and use it as an outlet, because also what the beautiful thing is what, as we talked about before, is an individual might not think it's a very good writing, but other people relate to it in a different way, and they interpret it a different way, and that's what's happening a lot with musicians adopting people's writings. They might not take the whole piece, but there'll be like a section of the writing which they build the song around, and they're inspired by that piece. So you don't need to be a fantastic writer, and Nick is a very good writer, but like it's open for everybody. It's like on the film, it's everybody's got a story to tell, and everybody's minds are different, but that individuality is relatable by other people, and that's what is bringing the community together. And so I just wanted to say that you didn't have to be a professional writer to sort of contribute. So.
Yep, I agree.
I'll
Billy,
just grab the
take
guitar.
it away.
I forgot my guitar too. Okay.
Let me heal my soul in water. Let the soap rub against my wounds, and I hear the waves, they're calling out my name, but I'm not near, no, I'm not search of closure. I watch the waves lap at the hole, but my heart's a compass in my hands. My eyes were bright, but my mind was stone. My mind was stone. So I grabbed the oars and gave a heave. Started to think, tried to believe. I rode and rode to a place where I could cope. And I focused on the here and now. I sat right back the bounded plow. I rode and rode in my small tin boat. In my small tin boat. Small boat. Oh, 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 I reached the shores of my white isle, the wet cool sand comforting my feet. I laid my head on this hollow ground, my eyes still bright, but my mind is sound. My mind is sound. And just beyond my darkest blues, rest in peace, my forgotten truths. So I leave it all behind, close my eyes and drift off with a long deep sigh, a long deep sigh. And I grabbed the oars and gave a heave, started to think, tried to believe. I rode and rode to a place where I could go, and I focused on the here and now. I sat right back the mountain plow. I rode and rode in my small tin boat. In my small tin boat. Small boat. Oh, 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 let me heal my soul with water. Let the soap rub against my wounds, and I find myself on this prison line. My eyes still bright, but my mind is dull. My mind is dull.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
It's wonderful. So Nick, this is the first time you've heard your words in musical form. Will you be able to give us a little insight into how you're feeling or your reaction?
Quite emotional. Again, I know I said it with Jess's song, but you know, I really appreciate a talent like Billy's, because I haven't got that talent. I can't play a musical instrument. I can't sing. So to hear what he's done with it is amazing. It's quite beautiful. It's quite, again, quite soulful and a bit more upbeat than I'd imagined it to be.
It started off very. It was a lot more mellow.
The closest thing, because I haven't got great musical references, but in terms of singers, I was thinking of Tom Odell, for example.
Okay.
Maybe that's insulted you. I don't know.
No, I don't know who Tom.
But yeah, it's beautiful, mate. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for writing that.
Yeah.
What is the name
Thank
of
you
the
both.
song?
Small. Well, the poem
Small
was
Tin
small
Boat?
tin boat, and then I took out tin. I do say it in the lyrics, but I then for the end I just take it
That's a
out.
copyright thing, adding in the unnecessary thing.
Small boat.
It is, small boat.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's just incredible. And again, you know, I'm coming back to this word sort of transformation in its many meanings. It's kind of, you know, transforming, and as the words kind of a feeling, and the noisy brain is transformed into words, those words transformed into song, that song transformed into kind of experience and feeling. It kind of resonates back. There's like a cycle that happens there that I think in itself, as you've described about the sharing, and it's kind of the getting out there of those words and feelings and thoughts, that something transformative perhaps happens within us, within that process, and we, music resonates, right? It kind of goes deep. Someone mentioned the soul, a second ago. I think it's beautiful. So thank you, and thank you to Stu for kind of creating
without people like Billy, it's just words on a white page.
Yeah.
It takes someone like Billy to turn it into something else.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So Stu, finally, would you kind of give us a little insight on kind of next stages for the Noisy Brain and what's coming up, perhaps?
Well, the next stage is everybody's going to download the app. And
I think the next stage
and make some music.
I think the next stage should we go for a pint.
Basically, I mean, just got big plans, but I'm looking at. I'm talking to a few investors as well. I've got some ideas with. This is no dig at you, Billy, either, but because the songs don't come immediately. What I want to do, and I don't want to lose the community aspect and the interaction and collaboration, but what I've been talking to a few people that are far more intelligent than myself that can convert this idea into artificial intelligence, and we can then put that onto the app, and people can either speak their words into the app or type their poems or their experiences in. And through artificial intelligence, music will come back in different forms, like depending on whether they would want to. For example, if you're anxious, like the two of us are, we need to be calmed down. But so the AI would take the opportunity to sort of like create music on a more immediate effect, because I think what I think is beautiful about the process is that the collaboration and seeing your words become music. But what I wanted to do is try and help people more immediately, and whether artificial intelligence can improve people's moods, whether that's uplifting and I mean, no, we all know that music can do that, but what I'm trying to do is create the opportunity that people can actually do this kind of quickly. They'll receive their own music back to them quite quickly, and then through the community, a playlist will be formed. So the ideal part would be the community, as you're all helping each other help that single person, because a playlist with the songs would end up sort of being created that calms people or uplifts people, and then we can look at other ways that we can use this technology for different sort of mental health issues. And I'm talking to some quite big tech people at the moment, and awaiting their decision on whether they're going to accompany me and the community on this journey. So that's a big thing, and then it's really sort of like getting the opportunity to spread the Noisy Brain word and create more events, music events, and opportunities to sort of help people. I mean, ideally what I want to do as well is, is that a big thing that everybody knows is like counselling and therapy costs so much. It's the reason I stopped, and it's obvious from today I still need it. What I want to do is be able to subsidise people's therapy and counselling sessions as a community, so that we can then start helping people. I think what the problem is at the moment with the Noisy Brain, the music side of things is beautiful, and the connections and the collaborations is amazing, but I want to be physically or seem to be helping, that I can show that a certain amount of people have been helped this year with their therapy sessions, for example. And I think that's where the next stage is going.
That's a great idea, because therapy costs an absolute fortune.
So, are you staying in the UK for a while?
I'm actually flying back to Singapore on Wednesday, next Wednesday. Yeah. But I'm back at Christmas. Why? Are we going on a date?
We've got a project.
No, because I wanted to talk with you about what you just said, and so how did it come to the idea to develop the app, and did it cost you a lot to develop the app?
The people at the back are going to... the people at the back, it's Jenna? No, Jenna and Dan. They're part... Well, I consider them part of the team. They're helping me out a lot. Not enough, though. But what I did, because I'm on a budget, I basically, and I'm going to explain this wrong, so excuse me, but I basically buy a skeleton of the app from a company called Disciple, and then I've sort of art directed it myself and designed it sort of as it looks, as it looks.
It's very nice, it's very appealing.
Yeah, what I wanted to do is, like, the reason it's got the vibrancy and the colours, and is what I found when I was researching the idea and putting it all together was a lot of mental health organisations have the same green or dark blues in colour tones, and although it's a serious subject, I wanted the Noisy Brain to stand out and have, if we can, a little bit more fun, like with what we do, a different approach to mental health that we can, not all the time. The songs aren't always going to be uplifting. They're always going to be different genres. Currently there's a heavy metal song being made further up the country. There's music being made all around the world, and so I've sidetracked. I can't remember why I was talking about that, but the design was to sort of like add a little vibrancy to like what is a sometimes dark place,
It's a light.
Yeah, we can't. Unfortunately, the idea is never going to solve the problem, but it does allow us eventually to talk more about our different issues. And that's another thing about the idea, is the beauty of it is people can write about any of their mental or emotional health issues. And what my plan, another plan, is to eventually sort of like be able to release albums and potentially a documentary series which takes each song, because each song's got its own mental health story and journey. So we start off with the, in Nick's case, like his reason for writing, the collaboration, where that song goes, and eventually, who knows where that song may or may not be played. Like one of them would have been here, like, it's the first one that's been played live, which is amazing, like from my point of view. Like,
I think it's great. Again, a sort of transformative process, and thank you for your question, because I think there's something about, knowing where those tools are, to have, from an experience to have an idea and then create it, whether it's through, accessing technologies that can do this for you, or connecting with the right people to support and advise. There's something kind of quite transformative that can come there, and I look forward to the Noisy Brain album festival maybe in the future, and all these Netflix series.
Noise
Here
fest.
we go. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, job done.
Cool. So thank you all for coming this afternoon, and thank you,
thank you guys.
to our panellists here, and thank you to Billy for the music. Keep making music, keep writing.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all for joining us for the Mental Wealth Festival this week.
It's been wonderful.
We
Thanks
have-
to you for organising this.
Yeah, thanks to Ian.